Welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing well out there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great, and appreciate you stopping by. Another day of Miami Dolphins mini camp, and a lot more talk today in the aftermath about culture, how things are changing, what are the football pillars that Mike McDaniel's sticking with, and so there's been a lot of talk about this that has gone on. We talked yesterday a little bit about how Tua was saying, he feels it in his heart that there's a culture change. I don't know what if there's been that dramatic of a change, because I think everybody, looked at this team and they a little bit looked at some of the people they lost, and you're like, it feels like there's a void there of the people that were actually accountable, professional, reliable, and it feels like there's going to be less of that this year that we know about. And yet everybody is sitting here talking about culture change with the Miami Dolphins, and I think it's a little bit crazy because it's the same regime. I mean, like, Mike McDaniel has changed a lot of defensive coordinators. There's been some coaching change, but ultimately this has been probably the thing that I wonder about him the most, and it is his ability to really lead an organization, and I think that there's definitely been a somewhat of a struggle for this coach as far as, handling all those duties of being atop an organization. I think he can do some things pretty great. I think that he rehabbed to his career well. Seems like he can call a mean game from time to time. Does feel like maybe some people caught up with him a little bit. Can he adjust to that while also running his organization, or should he pass off some duties? Well, he's been very firm that he's not going to do that he's going to remain more steadfast, and that he's going to continue to be play calling for this team. But man, there was this quote today from Bradley Chubb, and I was like, I appreciate the honesty from Bradley Chubb, who did not play last year. He got the orange jersey today, and very cool. Hope that Bradley Chubb has an awesome season. But I listened to this quote, and I was like, that's a crazy thing to say, dude. I appreciate the honesty, but it's a crazy, this revelation. And this is not the first time we've heard this. And I found a couple points of it interesting. So somebody asked him about the culture change. So it's been a big topic. It was mentioned this morning with head coach Mike McDaniel. How is Mike McDaniel changed? Is he more stern? Is he more of the adult in the room this season? What have you seen? And Bradley Chubb says, it's not necessarily him changing. It's more about us, man. About how we accept what he's telling us. Like, he may have a joking way of getting a serious point across, but it's up to us in the room to be like, oh, he might have said it funny, but at the end of the day, this is what we're doing. This is how we're moving about as a team, and this is what we're going to do. So it's not as much about him changing. I would say the people around him and the buy-in with the players that he wants has changed, and you guys are taking accountability of how we want to look out there, because he can only do so much in terms of with the game plan, the team meetings and all that, prepping, putting us in the right position. We've got to go out there and execute. So I would say I wouldn't say he's changed. I would say the mindset around him and around the team has changed. And I know that he probably thinks that comes off as a compliment, that Mike has remained the same guy. But it was interesting because Tyreek Hill said something about this, and I thought it was one of those typical Tyreek BS lines that he threw away. But he said something to the effect of I didn't really understand Mike McDaniel in previous years. And I was like, you didn't? And now he's saying it's coming across more thoroughly. Something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something to the effect of I didn't understand Mike McDaniel or the message he was trying to get across the previous years. This year I do. And I was like, that's kind of a crazy thing to say. You seem to be getting the message across just fine when it was cheated 2K. So It's been an interesting thing because one thing that has been noticeable about Mike, I don't know if you guys noticed this with his press conferences. Mike McDaniel's been, I mean, that dude is a potty mouth on him this mini camp and OTAs. Like, he has been cussing a lot. He's like dropping F-bombs today, talking about, if you could get called out, but you better change your effing behavior. He doesn't give a bleep about how he feels with the Jalen Ramsey thing. And I'm just like, this man is very wordy. Says a little while saying a lot of words. He's very inefficient with his words. And if that is true, like maybe people thought, oh, you're too jokey all the time. Maybe the swears are like a way for him to say, oh, that's a tick, to make himself be taken more seriously, I guess. I found it very noticeable because he maybe every once in a while, but like it's been like every press conference now. Every press conference, the Dolphins are like scrambling to take down the stream because Mike McDaniel said a no word. And I just have found that a little bit. I've found him, I guess odd is a bad word for him because a lot of people find him odd, but I've found that strange that he definitely seems like he's doing this with a lot less joy. Maybe there's a sense of urgency with him. So maybe it ends up being a good thing. I don't know. But it's interesting to hear Bradley Chubb say, yeah, people basically thought that he was joking all the time. They didn't know that he was to be taken seriously. And so, like, some of this stuff is pretty crazy because the Dolphins are sitting here and they're talking about, a culture change. And this is like, and some of that stuff is just complete, just and utter BS because the things that the Dolphins were being accused of last year is not anything to do with it's just a lack of professionalism. I don't find your team to get culture points to show up to things on time. That's doing your job. And to say like, the culture's changed, people are showing up on time. Like, to me, that's a bare minimum. That's not a culture change. Culture change is you're doing extra. Culture change is you're on the machines more, you're lifting more, you're in the gym more, you're in the building more. When you're in a work environment and you show up whenever you want, all that, like, and then you like, I've changed my culture, I show up on time. It's like, showing up on time is not changing culture. That's legitimately the job. You'll notice, like, if you guys have a job and you work with people, right? If you're one-on-one, you're late every once in a while with somebody, you give them an explanation. Usually that's fine. Hey, man, things happen, right? But one thing when you notice when people are late and tardy to things, when you're in an atmosphere where everybody else is on time, but somebody else is late all the time, that can erode culture because it can give more people the sense that they can get away with something. But to me, a person then changing that behavior to actually be a professional is not a culture change. That's just doing your job. To me, a culture change would be like, not only are we showing up on time, we're staying later. We're putting in more work. We're doing X, Y, Z. That to me would be a culture change. So when I hear things like, we're culture's changed, dude, we've showed up on time, it's like, you started doing your job. Great. Like, are we supposed to give that brownie points? And then Bradley Chubb said something even crazier because he was asked by Omar Kelly. He said, so you said buy-in because we heard a lot of the same stuff last year, which great call out by Omar. Not saying that y'all were lying, but hanging out together, spending time together, getting to know each other, caring about one another, which is totally fair. Last year we heard that same story last year. Heard it with Odell Beckham. And remember who it was? Everybody was saying Odell Beckham is getting everybody together. And Odell Beckham Jr. is getting everybody together to hang out in the offseason. Bradley Chubb said, I'm going to say last year we were lying, honestly. Laughs at it, which I appreciate the honesty. But he says, I'm going to say last year we were lying, honestly. Point blank period. We felt it. We put our toe in the water, but we didn't dive all the way in. We didn't get all the way in with one another. We weren't making the effort to go the extra mile. I would say this year we're doing that. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out for us, but putting forth that foot to change it, because last year, like I said, we wanted to change it. We were doing this, we were doing that, but we're not exactly how we want to. This year, I feel like everybody has the right mindset moving forward, so if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, we're going to go back to the drawing board and make sure that it works out. But, like, it's pretty funny to hear a guy just go like, yeah, all that talk, we're hanging out more. Remember the big word was bullies last year. We're going to be bullies. He's like, yeah, that was a lie. And to be fair to him, look, he didn't play. I mean, he was sitting here rehabbing from an injury. So I think from Bradley Chubb's standpoint, it was probably a hard place to be in. And I think, I don't know what credit he gets for Chop Robinson, but I'm sure he did as best as he could leading from the sidelines as he's working his way back. But, man, I don't think anybody wants to hear this. I don't think anybody really cares. You know, it's nice. I'm good for the guys if it is working out. Dude, I'm telling you right now, same coach, same defensive coordinator, majority of the same players, some changes on the offensive line, a lot of changes in the defensive backfield. Seems like they're going to be more fortified up front. Pretty excited about some of the young guys they got either coming up for their second year or their rookie year. I don't really give a rat's ass about the culture. There is no culture right now. The true culture right now of this franchise is 25 years without a playoff win, you know, and I'm glad that maybe they've gotten to a point where they're not buying into their own BS as much anymore. I guess that's a good thing. But I'm going to tell you, man, whatever it is, it feels very, very, very fragile. And I don't know if there's a team that needs a hotter start in the National Football League than the Miami Dolphins, because it feels like they can say all the right things, but that pressure cooker feels like it's going to get turned up. If this Dolphins team gets off to like a 1-3 start, you know, even 2-3, it feels like that pressure can turn on really, really, really quick. And I don't know if the way Mike McDaniel's speaking is echoing him feeling that pressure and knowing where it's at right now. And but you know, I don't think any fan really wants to hear this stuff. You know, I think like the thing with the Dolphins fan is I think that a lot of people who were believers, sure there were skeptics, but the ones who were believers after the way 2023 ended, you're like, hard luck injuries, it all unraveled, they weren't ready to win. You went into last year, you said all the right things, people wanted to believe. It blew up in their face. So now, once you do that to a fan base and even the most diehards, then it just completely goes into show me mode, you know? You don't really know. Like, well, I'll give you an example. Paul Maurice, right? Right now, the Panthers are in the midst of the Stanley Cup final. This was a big thing for people who haven't followed the Panthers story. The Panthers, before Paul Maurice, were a high-flying, high-scoring, offensive juggernaut. And the Panthers would play all these games that would be like, they'd be down 4-1 and win 6-4, or would win, you know, just high-scoring affairs up and down. There was no defense. But it was fun. I mean, it was basically essentially greatest show on surf, but it was on ice. And they just got dog walked when they got to the playoffs. And that's when Bill Zito decided, like, hey, something truly has to change. And they move on from Andrew Burnett, who was there for a year. They bring in Paul Maurice, who didn't have this glowing reputation that he does now, right? Like, he wasn't a champion. In fact, was probably more known for having the most losses. I wasn't a firm believer in him. I was like, all right, this guy's he's a lot of likes the sound of his own voice. Right now, champion, he's wise. But his plan, and the Panthers the next year did not have a good year. Like, they were the 8th seed. they were playing a different style. But he said the entire year, he's like, it's about what it's, the style. And eventually that toughness came through because they came out of a 3-1 deficit to upset a record-breaking Bruins team. And it finally showed through. And then everybody was like, even I, who was a skeptic, had to be like, well, I obviously am an idiot because this is showed to be true. Because they wouldn't have won that, not even been close in that last year. So I'm hoping like hell that all of what they're saying is now true, even though they've admitted to lying. And Mike McDaniel does have all these guys pulling in the same direction. But I don't know. I think everybody's under the impression there's things you can be excited about because I think there are young players that absolutely be excited about what they're going to turn into. But all the chatter stuff, the culture stuff, all that stuff is just ringing really, really hollow right now. And nobody gives a rat's ass about it.